stage, so I don't have to scream now. I was going to be an actor once, but I'm not very good, so I can't really project from the diaphragm like Alexandra can. What a great concert. Thank you very much. And thank you also for the insights into not only you as an artist, but also into the song. So that's great. It's fantastic. Thank you very much. Now for the kind of formal, informal part of the 45th birthday concert event. We've got 4 speakers, and I'm going to say something at the end as well, trying to tie it all together, and I have a special message from our patron as well. We thought we go backwards. So we're going to start with Mervyn Curtis, who is the daughter of Rita Hunter, who we all know and love. And she was one of the very first artists, a great Wagnerian, that was associated with our society from the very early days. So Mervyn will say a few words, and then we're going to go kind of backwards. We have a message from Margaret and Clare Hennessy from Leona, and they couldn't be here. They are the twins, as we call them. They are some of the foundation members of the society. Jenny Ferns is going to say something. Where are we going to do? She is. And then we're going to finish with Professor Michael Ewens, who has the distinct, I love this, he has the distinct honour of being member 0. I love that. I don't think many organisations have that, but we have, I love it. Every time I see it, I go, oh, this is great. Honorary Life Member and former Vice President Leona Geeves, on behalf of Margaret and Clare Hennessy, I believe.
Well, first of all, I just want to say a wonderful thank you to Alex and Tom for such a beautiful, heartrending concert to mark this 45th anniversary of our tumultuous society. So a message from the twins, Clare and Margaret Hennessy, who are our founders, probably two of the very few of the founders left, and our members of longest standing, who unfortunately don't handle crowds and can't be here. And they send their love and congratulations, particularly to their friends and colleagues, Jenny Ferns, Dennis and John, who I think are travelling in Switzerland, and Terence Watson, who's here somewhere. So greetings and love from them, and we all miss the ones we've lost, and there've been far too many of those. So I'll hand you on to Jenny Ferns, who's going to say something.
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I'll read my little bit. I've been invited to remember how it was at the beginning. Okay. In the ancient days of the late 1970s and 80s, before the internet, videos, DVDs, CDs, Blu-rays and Spotify, but the availability of 78 RPM LPs, people liked to gather to enjoy common interests. In my case, I wanted to further the mystery of Wagner's Ring, apart from all the other better-known standalone Wagner operas. Fortunately, in Sydney there exists the WEA, Workers' Educational Association, which runs courses on various topics for which there are knowledgeable tutors available. In my case, the name of Werner Beer was familiar in Sydney musical circles. This charming gentleman with a distinctive German accent and an active mind offered such a course, Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung, a 10-week course for which he used a room at the Opera House. When he allocated 10 weeks elapsed and the final lecture had not covered the conclusion of Götterdämmerung, additional lectures were offered at the WEA headquarters in Bathurst Street in the city. In those days, Wagner Bear had an interested assistant to operate a tape recorder. That helped to illustrate the leitmotiven and passages of music being described. At the conclusion of the eventual final lecture, the assistant needed to operate a bright red light globe to illuminate the room. This was to convey the impression of the inferno of the immolation scene. Somehow, through Wagner Bear or other contracts, including Clare and Margaret Hennessy, I found out that a group of interested participants had conveyed a meeting at an art gallery in Woollahra to discuss the prospect of forming a Wagner Society. This tickled my fancy. It was a nice afternoon and I went along. I knew a few people there, but watched the proceedings in fascination. The rest is history. Subsequently, regular meetings were arranged, mostly in the inner western suburb of Stanmore, where there was a German community club called Concordia. There, on monthly Sunday afternoons, a very enthusiastic Dutchman, Jean-Louis Sturop, and his girlfriend, Jane, regularly prepared and presented sections of particular Wagner operas. These were studied and enjoyed using the LPs and roneoed or photocopied duplications of the parallel text from a record box for eager participants to follow the text of the singing. Some just simply listened. Regular meetings like these were the main activities of the Society in order to inspire members and their friends to encourage and promote performances and interest in matters Wagnerian. At that stage, the prospect of actual live performances in Sydney of any of these operas was scarce. Sometime later, it became known that this Wagner Society had a very well-connected committee. They could apply through a ballot system for tickets to the annual Wagner Opera Festival held in distant Bayreuth in Germany. This privilege was spread to members of the Wagner Society. Ballots were conducted, and in 1985, I was able to join lucky folk who obtained tickets to open the real doors to what has since become a regular highlight of my European experiences. Wagner Bear became the first life member of the Wagner Society of New South Wales. Thank you.
That's wonderful, and that reminds me as well, this is a bit of a commercial break before we have the final speaker. We have issued a call for those that would be interested to go to the Bayreuth Festival next year. If you are interested, please email me with your selections and price range, and I will endeavour to get tickets. The system of getting tickets from Bayreuth has somewhat changed over the years, and it's much more easier now to get tickets. Well, it's not easier to get tickets, but the process is much easier to get tickets. So finally, Honorary Life Member and Member Zero, Professor Michael Ewens.
Is that right? I'm going to take a 1 minute to divert before I start, to thank Alexandra, who I see is still at the back of the audience. I haven't heard a recital with such a great combination of technical ability and expressive emotionality for a very long time. And if I may presume to make a selection, if you could ever change your park, maybe in 10 years' time, see Glinda, please. After what I've heard today, I think that would be ideal for you, especially the Dame poem. Oh dear. Right, Member Zero. I never understood or found out that that was my number until 4 years ago, when a speaker at the last one, 5 years ago, when the speaker at the last reunion told me that it was. It's an oddity and a rather nice one. Now, I'm 79 just, and my memory isn't quite what it was. But I do have two memories of the early days, which I will share with you briefly. And then I'm going to talk a bit about a paper which I found on my computer going right back to 2003, which is 22 years ago, so that's quite a good long time. And that might stimulate you to think a bit about Wagner himself, because I did say I'm going to give you a brief précis of what I said then. Now, the Concordia Club, Marrickville. Yes, I remember it well. Particularly memorable because it's quite a drive down from Newcastle in those days. There wasn't quite as much freeway as there is now, and I and my then wife were pretty stressed by the time we got here. The subject was Die Walküre, and I'd been patiently transferring from my carry-on Ring 33 RPM discs to a tape cassette, extracts, which I wanted to play. I didn't bring it down. But my first favourable impression of the Wagner Society was that I gave the paper explaining the extracts that were missing, and everyone understood because they knew the opera so well. And I thought, my God, if they know the stuff this well, they can follow a cork which presumed that they were hearing the music, then they can't be half bad. The other memory is, of course, of your mother. She and I became honorary life members in the same year, and we had a dinner with the then committee, or most of them, I imagine. It was very memorable, but there's one strange thing that I have to mention. One of the committee had brought a lady friend who was not a Wagnerian, and she couldn't understand any of the conversation. It was so sad. She was sitting next to me, so I took it upon myself to talk some social things to ease her embarrassment, not following what the rest of us were rabbiting on about. It's the only time I've had a non-Wagnerian at one of these events, but it was quite memorable. Rita was marvellous, I do remember that, in life as in art. Now, I went onto my computer, and miracle of miracles, a paper, not in a modern format, which I gave in 2003, survived, and I was able to transpose it and look at it. And it's got some quite interesting things, and I'm going to spend about 5 minutes hitting the highlights of it, since we haven't talked much about Wagner himself, quite rightly today, nor have we heard much of him, because, well, we did hire a brilliant coloratura, but she's not quite ready for the big Wagner roles yet. And nor should she be, it would wreck her voice. Wagner in Perspective, I called it, 120 years after the master's death. And of course, the master, Cosima, equally, of course, adoring her husband, Der Meister, as he always was to her. And I asked myself and the audience, why is he so loved? Look at all these Wagner societies worldwide. And why is he so hated? Many people hate the just dislike the music very intensely, and of course the debate about his anti-Semitism and his jingoistic nationalism has only intensified in Germany since it attempted to rebuild itself after the Second World War. But Der Meister, what might privilege him above other great opera composers? And that's what I addressed myself to. And briefly, here are the 7 topics that I decided to discuss. First of all, the use of myth. The great moment for me with Wagner is when he goes away from the medievalism of the medieval settings of Tannhäuser and Lohengrin, and which he returned to later in his great comic opera, Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, and passed on to mythical subjects, Tristan and Isolde, The Ring, and I think we've got to call Parsifal mythical, even though it's a strange brew of Christianity, Buddhism, and several other specifically Wagnerian elements. It is, of course, based on Wolfgang von Essenbart's Parsifal, but anyone who's actually read that will find it's a lot different. For example, Wolfgang's Parsifal is happily married at the beginning of the poem, and that's hardly Wagnerian. So, myth, that was the first start. Then, the style of the music and the relationship to the drama. As you must know, I hope, The Ring, Tristan, and Parsifal are durchkomponiert, through composed, with ensembles avoided and overlaps of voices avoided, and furthermore, most syllables set to one note each. This is true generally, and it's designed for maximum comprehensibility. So there are no more arias, no more duets, no more ensembles, and no more choruses. All the grand moments of other great opera composers, and lesser ones too, in which the demands of melody, and indeed of music per se, took precedence over the unfolding of the drama. However, as I hope you also realise, Wagner lapsed. At the end of Siegfried, if you just care to contrast it with the end of Die Walküre Act 1, there are two rather questionable love affairs going on and ending just after the curtain falls in an act of sexual intercourse. Fortunately, the curtain falls just in time. The second one is a full-tone duet, 19th century style, with a held tenor and the lead soprano, drams up, belting it out as the curtain falls, as I'm sure you all remember. And as for Götterdämmerung, it is full of, it has a chorus, it has ensembles, trios, etc. And the reason for that is, of course, that the text was written before the rest of the ring. It was conceived as what Wagner himself called a grand heroic drama called Siegfried's Tod, the death of Siegfried. And if you've studied the two carefully, the libretto of Götterdämmerung is very similar indeed in most major respects to Siegfried's Tod. And it's very interesting that Wagner did not reshape that, even after he'd written the texts for the three prequels, that Rheingold, Walküre, Siegfried, all of which follow the rule I just outlined. If I can put in a brief commercial, I've been fascinated by this whole idea of the opera which is not an opera, the opera which avoids ensembles and the other grand gestures, and you'll notice, of course, that none of those so-called operas are in fact called operas. Tristan und Isolde is a Handlung, an action, and The Ring and Parsifal are stage festival plays, Bühnenfestspiele. And I've been following this in my latest book, which I hope will come out next year, called Sexually Transgressive Heroines, because it traces the 6 opera composers of the early 20th century who adopted that Wagnerian approach. They are Debussy, Per les Emancons, Strauss in his first 2 one-act dramas, Salome and Elektra, Bartók in Du Blewitz Castle, Zemlinsky in Eine Florentinische Tragödie, a Florentine tragedy, and Janacek and Berg in all their operas. And other interesting point, they're all based on plays. So there was no incentive to put in ensembles, etc. You could simply follow what are called the late Wagnerian rules. Content of the music. The Ring is, of course, well, not of course, but I think, a work in which powerful insights into human psychology are created in a vision which opposes male power, swords, spears, ring, to female nature surrounding it. Erde, and especially, of course, the moment in Act 1 of Die Walküre, where spring bursts into the house to mark the reunion of Siegmund with Sieglinde. And he uses his music to give power to dramatic symbols, such as the forest murmurs and woodbird in Siegfried, which would carry almost no power in a purely spoken drama, but become, in these music dramas, deep indicators of nature interacting with the state of the psyches of the characters. Next, the political and social meaning of the ring. Bernard Shaw memorably wrote in Perfect Wagnerite that the trilogy is an allegory of the decline and fall of 19th century capitalism. And I'm going to quote briefly from that text. Quote Shaw, "Really, of course, the dwarfs, giants and gods are dramatizations of the 3 main orders of men, to wit the instinctive, predatory, lustful, greedy people, the patient, toiling, stupid, respectful, money-worshipping people, and the intellectual, moral, talented people who devise and administer states and churches. History shows us only one order, higher than the highest of these, namely the order of heroes." What Shaw omits to say in that otherwise excellent analysis is, of course, that the race of heroes is extinguished by female powers, Brunhilde and the Rheintochter, at the end of Götterdämmerung. Now, this insight was, for several bad reasons, neglected or ignored for exactly 100 years after the first complete Ring at Bayreuth. That is why Patrice Giraud's centenary production in 1976, which I managed to attend in 1979, after being given tickets through the intervention of my friend from college years, John Dethridge with Frau Gudrun Wagner. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got in. But Dethridge wrote to Gudrun and said, he's writing a book on the ring, can you come? So I did, and it blew my mind away. Because Chauvel's centenary production, set in and after Wagner's lifetime in an industrialised Europe, is a realisation of Shaw's insight into the political allegory which the ring is. And it swept away at one stroke all the crazy things like Donington's Jungian analysis, the ring and its symbols, favour and favour, which were silly. And just one moment in the Chauvel ring, the final tableau. After Brunhilde has jumped into the flames, no Grana, thank goodness, it's far difficult to do that. The last music comes in after the Rhine daughters have reclaimed the ring. The whole chorus, all these men and women, turn and face the audience during those wonderful, serene final bars. And what they're saying is, the gods, the heroes have all gone. It's over to you. And it was a couple of years after that ring was first staged that Dethridge himself discovered a previously unpublished letter of Wagner's in which he refers to the end of the ring as the passing on of power to what he called the Gesamtheit of mankind, the totality of mankind. And Chauvel had realised that. That's just one thing from a production which gets that Shaw allegory interpretation onto the stage. And it took 100 years for that to happen. I'm a drama person, so I want to draw your attention to Wagner's work as a director. He was one of the very first ever stage directors. The Duke of Saxe-Meiningen was the other with straight plays. But if you haven't read it, you absolutely must read Heinrich Porges' little book, Wagner's Staging of the Ring, which details how Wagner directed the actors. Now, the director did not exist before this time. It was never done. You simply, if you were a singer, chose your pose and stood and delivered. Usually that way, even if your love life is there, it's also staring that way, straight into the audience. But if you read Porges, you will see how Wagner coaxed out of singers who were used to that sort of thing a realistic performance with interactions between them. He's especially interesting on the Siegmund-Sieglinde relationship as it develops throughout Act 1 of Die Walküre, and Act 2 for that matter. And sorry to talk about Chauvel again, but if you want to see in a modern production what Wagner really wanted, you can do worse than study what Peter Hoffmann and Janine Altmaier did with Wagner's Walküre Act 1. The realistic gestures, exactly what Wagner wanted. Whether he altogether got it out of the singers of 1856, I don't know, but he certainly tried. The auditorium. We all take the Festspielhaus for granted, but we shouldn't. It's the first modern democratic.
Sorry.
Because you must remember that apart from hobnobbing with aristocracy and conning money out of Ludwig II, Wagner was in many ways a socialist. He was a personal friend of Bakunin, and he had to leave Munich in disgrace after the revolution in 1870, because he'd been actively involved in attempting to overthrow the government. And it's fortunate he did, because otherwise he'd have stayed in prison for a very long time, like some of his friends. So a democratic audience, because as I'm sure most of you have been to Bayreuth, if not all, the Festspielhaus is built on the model of ancient Greek theatre, with all the seats in rows going up and up and up. No impeding boxes on the side for the aristocracy, and even King Ludwig, with his pathological shyness, had to take refuge at the back in a specially constructed little box for him. Otherwise, we're all Democrats, and the steep rake is also new. Finally, on the production, the house lights went right down to zero during acts. This was also a novelty at the time. Even in the late 19th century, it usually went only down to half lights. And finally, what about the mystic gulf and the hidden orchestra? This is one of the most marvellous things. I don't like going to most opera houses because I like to see from above, so I buy seats in the circle rather than the stalls. and there's this bloody orchestra scraping away and going away. Then the magic of Bayreuth, the lights go down, faint to zero, the faint glow from Mystic Gulf, and there go the double basses with the Litany of Rheingold. Out of nowhere, you can't see them. Why hasn't anyone copied this? It should be mandatory worldwide. Set design. Nearly there, that's the last one. This is the last one. Wagner, we now know from Cosima's diaries, privately absolutely deplored and hated the costumes and sets for the Ring and later for Parsifal. Cosima remarked to him, as we now know from her diaries, they look like Red Indian chiefs, about the gods of Rheingold and Valkyra in the original Ring. And as for Wagner himself, despite the fact that he took his designer to Palermo and told him to look at the cathedral and model the Grail scenes of Parsifal on it, when he actually did the production, Wagner said this to Cosima: I invented the invisible orchestra. If only I could invent the invisible stage. Yes, he did. Just consult the diaries for 1882. But after the master died, Cosima decided that all productions of Bayreuth should be replicas of the original Ring and Parsifal designs. And when a young and brilliant Swiss designer-director called Adolf Tappier wrote a book called La mise en scène du drame Wagnerienne, the staging of Wagnerian drama, which was also rapidly translated into German, Cosima put him down in the way only Cosima can. Mr. Tappier should realise that the Ring was produced by the master, that word again, here in 1856. Therefore, nothing that he adds is of any value. So there. And again, that lasted all too long, because the horns and the helmets and all that stuff went right through to the Third Reich, where Adolf Hitler and his cronies warmly applauded these recreations, as he wrongly believed, of Teutonic, primitive, of early society in Teutonic times. Only, of course, as you must know, after World War II, did Wieland, recognising that this whole Herrenvolk thing had to go if his grandfather's works were ever to be taken seriously again outside Germany, stripped the stage to nothing, and Hans Hotter sort of wandered around as Wotan, looking like a monk who just happened to have a spear in his hand. It was a complete decluttering, as we'd say these days, and it was brilliant. So, conclusion. Yes, Wagner was a great opera composer. He's up there with the other very few giants of the medium. And by giants of the medium, I mean the very few people who've actually composed 4 or more operas which have been established in the standard modern repertoire. There are some great one-offs: Debussy, Pélez et Mélisande, Beethoven, Fidelio, Bartók, Lubin's Castle. But here are the following people who actually get regularly performed in the standard repertory internationally today. They are Mozart, Verdi, Puccini, Janáček, and perhaps Strauss. And I say perhaps because although Salome, Electra, and Rosenkavalier have established themselves in the repertoire, performances of Ariadne, which you're singing next year, and of anything else after that are very rare, even in Germany. So Wagner is certainly up there with the other big 5. But there are a few problems about Wagner, and even in a Wagner Society we need to confront them. Firstly, there is the vigorously debated matter of anti-Semitism. Yes, his writings are appalling, but it is in the operas as well. I'm afraid I'm with those who think it is in the caricature of Mima, and to a lesser extent Albrecht. Then, women. As you doubtless know, Wagner loved and idolised women right through his life. Poor Matilda von Wesson on all this effusion, but she did help us to get Chris done, so that was rather good. And then that's brought Judy Yorso, whose costumes and perfumes and scents and clothes Wagner was so fascinated with at the time when he was creating Parsifal. But In most of Wagner, a woman is either a vicious witch like Venus or Kundry, or a golden girl like Senta or Elizabeth, or perhaps even Elsa. I find, and this may be controversial, but I'd like to finish with it because it is controversial, why not? I find only 3 fully rounded female characters in this opera. Sorry, 4. They are Isolde, Sieglinde, Brunhilde, and emphatically, because she's underrated constantly, Gutruna. So, and that does not compare favourably with either Mozart or Janacek or Strauss, all of whom show a profound understanding, as far as I can tell as a mere male, of female psychology, female actions. Still, finally, I'm going, now, relax. But Wagner was more than just another major composer. Those 7 points I've split over very quickly for you make him something altogether more. Contributions to set design, contributions to directing, a new kind of opera called music drama. So perhaps he does deserve to be called their Meister. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. You've touched on so many things there, and some of them we're actually going to engage with next year. There's a new book on Adolfo Appia by an Australian architect from Sydney University, who I think I'm wanting to come and talk to us about. And next month, I'm going to be talking about decluttering around Meistersinger. So, yes, it's the condo effect of. Anyway. Just to, I guess, summarise the 45 years, we've had, as to quote Roger Cruikshank, we've had our Alberich moment in the society, and we've come through that better, healthier, much more rigorous in our approach to how we compose ourselves as a society. And I'm very happy to see today that we've got all the honorary life members, bar 2 who are overseas, being Roger in New Zealand and Dennis, who is still, I believe he's at the proms. He's not in Switzerland, or is he in Switzerland? Oh no, they're in Switzerland, yes. That's right, the sommeliers, eating and drinking, wonderful. Two of our favourite things as Wagnerians. Talking about Wagner, drinking and whilst drinking and eating. Look, in the 45 years that we've been around, we've done quite a lot, as has been acknowledged by Alexandra as well. And we hope to do a lot more. There are projects afoot in the coming years which will be a challenge for us, but I think very, very exciting, which would, I guess, will take us out of the shadows as a little bit and put us a little bit centre stage. Not something that I like to do, but it's going to happen. Yes, so the HLM, sorry, Leona Geeves, Margaret Willie, Liz Bergman, Terence Watson over there. Who else did I miss? Of course, Michael. There's somebody else. Barbara Brady, of course. That's it. I think that's 6, and then the other 2 are overseas. So there you go. Some of the things that we're doing now that we couldn't do even 20 years ago is be more connected to our fellow societies, not only in Australia, but around the world. And I'm very happy that we have very good relationships with all the societies in Australia, so with Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, and also with New Zealand and Singapore. We've forged a very close sort of little clique, and we're hoping to expand that with new societies in Thailand. There's a new one in Thailand. There's some new ones in South Korea as well. The Asia Pacific, we're going to reach out to Chile and Hawaii, who's American, but we're trying to bring them into as a sort of Asia Pacific clique. But we've got things like, for instance, thanks to Mari Leach, the Vice President, we've got things like the Wagner Journal, which is the premier journal on Wagner. And if you're not subscribing, well, if you're a member of the society, you can get it for free now because we have access to it on our website. And one of even the latest news that even the committee doesn't know about, we received an email yesterday from the New York Society granting us a membership for 25-26 of the New York Society, which means that we have access to their streaming services and a lot of their talks, which is fantastic. Something that we are trying to do, we are technologically challenged, but we are hoping to be able to at least stream talks so that all our fellow societies around Australia and the Asia Pacific can actually tune in and hear what we do. So it's getting bigger and bigger, which is great. And on that note, I think it's cake and drink time. So yes, thank you. Barbara, where's the cake? And where are we? Oh, we're cutting it over there. Thank you. Yes, sorry. And I've got it in my hand. I feel like Chamberlain, but without.
You should go out the side door.
We received a note from our patron Simone. A good point to finish on. So I'll read it out. My heartiest congratulations to the New South Wales Wagner Society on the celebration of 45 years! Exclamation mark. In this time, the Wagner Society has done so much to help young Australian artists in their development in this most challenging of operatic repertoires. Together with the very informative conversation evenings and lectures, the Society continues to work to further develop interest and deepen knowledge of Richard Wagner's monumental works. There are many great fine Australian artists now working both here in Australia and overseas on some of the most prestigious stages, and all have been assisted at some time by the Wagner Society. I myself first visited Bayreuth in 1986 with the help of a small travel grant from the Society, and look where I have ended up. Long may the Society continue in its work to promote potential and to celebrate the love of these extraordinary operas. Simone Young. Cake cutting happening at the back.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Happy birthday to you.
Thank Barbara. She makes these amazing cakes. She's been doing it for a long time and they're all fantastic.